An arrogant police officer, at the peak of his power, believed he was untouchable. He didn't know that the humble market vendor he humiliated was the mother of a detective feared for her unwavering pursuit of justice. The consequence was devastating. The sun, once so vibrant at the market, now seemed a cruel spotlight on a scene of desolation. Mrs. Rosa Davies, her hands trembling, tried to gather the few tomatoes that hadn't been crushed on the muddy ground. The smell of wet earth and the acidity of spoiled fruit mingled with the bitterness in her mouth. Silent tears streamed down her wrinkled face, not just for the material loss, but for her trampled dignity. The murmurs of the crowd, previously drowned out by the officer's shouts, were now whispers of indignation and helplessness. No one dared to intervene, fearing the same disproportionate fury of Sergeant Miller, who, with a sneer, was already walking away, the sound of his boots echoing on the hot asphalt. The scene, however, did not go unnoticed. A young pastry vendor, Maria, who had known Mrs. Davies for years, watched everything with a heavy heart. Her tear-filled eyes fixed on the elderly woman's fragility. Maria pulled out her phone, her hand trembling, and recorded the last seconds of the humiliation, the image of the officer walking away, his laughter still reverberating in her ears. She wasn't sure what to do with the recording, but she felt she had to act. Hours later, the market's hustle and bustle had quieted. But Mrs. Davies' pain persisted. In her small home, she tried to compose herself, her mind replaying every detail of the affront. The phone rang, a jarring sound that made her jump. It was Maria, the pastry vendor, her voice choked with anger and concern. "Mrs. Davies, are you all right? I saw everything. It's outrageous. I recorded it. You need to report him." Mrs. Davies sighed. "Report him to whom, my dear? He's a police officer. They always protect their own." But Maria wouldn't give up. "No, Mrs. Davies, you have a daughter who's a detective. Detective Helena. She won't let this slide." The name Helena, spoken amidst her pain, brought a mix of pride and apprehension to Mrs. Davies. She knew of her daughter's unshakable integrity, but didn't want her personal problems to interfere with Helena's brilliant career. Meanwhile, at Central Precinct, the clock marked the end of an exhausting day for Detective Helena Davies. Stacks of case files covered her solid oak desk, and the strong aroma of coffee hung in the air. She was reviewing a complex report on a public funds embezzlement scheme, her brow furrowed in concentration. The phone on her desk vibrated, a discreet hum she almost ignored. It was an unknown number. "Detective Helena Davies," she answered, her voice calm and professional. On the other end of the line, Maria, the vendor, took a deep breath. "Detective Davies, my name is Maria. I'm from the market. I need to talk to you about your mother." The mention of her mother made Helena's body stiffen. Her professionalism wavered for an instant. "My mother? What happened?" Maria's voice choked. She was humiliated today at the market, Detective Davies, by a police officer. He knocked her things over, yelled, demanded money. It was horrible. I have a recording." A heavy silence fell over Helena's office. The hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. The report in her hands became irrelevant. A wave of shock coursed through every fiber of her being, quickly replaced by a chilling fury. Her mother, Mrs. Rosa Davies, the woman who had raised her with such sacrifice, to whom she owed everything, publicly humiliated. Her blood boiled. Helena's fist clenched on the desk, her knuckles white. "Send me that recording immediately, Maria." Helena's voice, though low, carried an intensity that would make any criminal tremble. "And tell me exactly where and when this happened, every detail." The pain in her chest was searing, a mix of sadness and indignation that threatened to overflow, but Helena wouldn't allow it. She rose from her chair, her eyes fixed on the window, where the city lit up with nightlights. The image of her mother, frail, trampled, was a powerful trigger. Sergeant Miller didn't know what he had just done. He didn't know he had just awakened the fury of a lioness defending her cub. That act of cowardice would not only be punished, it would be the spark for a relentless hunt against the corruption that corroded the force. The consequence, as the story promised, would be truly devastating. Helena didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the phone screen illuminating her tense face. Maria's message arrived in seconds, a heavy video file that began to load. Helena's heart beat an accelerated rhythm, a dull drum in her chest. She clicked play, and the shaky image of the market filled the small screen. There it was, her mother, Mrs. Davies, hunched over, her white hair disheveled, her hands trying in vain to protect her goods. And there he was, the officer, his immaculate uniform contrasting with the dirt on the ground, his cruel smile distorting his lips. His voice, amplified by the phone's microphone, echoed through the silent office, a growl of abusive authority. "Insolent old woman! Pay what you owe, or your fruits will become fertilizer." The sound of the tomatoes falling and crushing, a wet and revolting noise, made Helena's stomach churn. The sergeant's laughter, a shrill and repugnant sound, seemed to pierce her ears. Helena paused the video. The image of her mother's contorted face, frozen on the screen, Sergeant Miller's badge, visible for an instant, imprinted itself on her mind. Sergeant Miller. She repeated the name in a hoarse whisper. The fury that had been chilling now burned, a consuming fire that threatened to melt her professional composure. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a brief moment, recomposing the steel mask she wore for her work. With a dry click of the mouse, she opened the force's internal system. In a few minutes, Miller's complete file was before her. Service history, promotions, some conduct notes that, before, might have been considered minor, but which now screamed for attention. There was a pattern, a thin line of arrogance and small ignored infractions, culminating in her mother's humiliation. The air conditioning system hummed softly, the only sound filling the tense silence of the office as Helena analyzed every detail. She knew she couldn't act impulsively. Corruption, like a cancer, spread silently. She needed allies, people who shared her integrity. Her gaze fell on the phone again. She wouldn't call internal affairs immediately. She needed a solid foundation, irrefutable proof, and a plan. Dialing a familiar number, she waited. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Detective Hayes?" a grave voice answered. Ricardo was her right-hand man, a man of few words and unshakable loyalty. "I need you here now. It's urgent and extremely delicate. Bring your laptop and come prepared for a long night." Across town, oblivious to the web being woven around him, Sergeant Miller celebrated his day's work in a noisy bar. The clinking of glasses and the buzz of conversations drowned out any premonition. He laughed loudly, telling a colleague about the stubborn old woman who tried to play the victim at the market. "Had to teach her a lesson, right? To show her who's boss," he bellowed, a gulp of beer going down his throat, the bitter taste mixing with his satisfaction. The colleague merely shook his head, a weak smile on his face, not daring to contradict the sergeant's arrogance. In her simple home, Mrs. Davies sat at the kitchen table, her wrinkled hands holding a cup of warm tea. The comforting aroma of herbs couldn't entirely soothe the unease in her chest. Maria's call, and the fact that Helena knew, brought a mix of relief and worry. She knew her daughter. She knew Helena wouldn't rest until justice was served, but she also feared the consequences of messing with big shots. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. Back at Central Precinct, Helena heard Ricardo's approaching footsteps. The door creaked softly as it opened. She didn't need to say a word. The expression on her face, a mix of contained pain and iron determination, spoke for itself. "We have a problem, Ricardo," she began, her voice low, but charged with unshakable force. "A problem that goes beyond a simple corrupt officer. This is about the soul of our force, and we're going to clean it up, whatever the cost." The click of Ricardo's laptop opening echoed in the office, the sound of a battle about to begin. The click of Ricardo's laptop opening filled the tense silence of the office. Detective Helena Davies didn't need to repeat the last sentence. The gravity in her gaze, the contained pain in her upright posture, spoke louder than any words. She gestured to the phone screen on the desk. "Watch!" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, but the order was undeniable. Ricardo, with his usually impassive demeanor, leaned in. The video began to play, the shaky image of the market filling the small screen. The sound of Sergeant Miller's voice, amplified by the phone's microphone, echoed through the silent office, a growl of abusive authority. "Insolent old woman, pay what you owe or your fruits will become fertilizer." The wet and revolting noise of the tomatoes falling and crushing made the detective clench his lips. The sergeant's shrill and repugnant laughter pierced the air. Ricardo's face hardened with each passing second. He saw Mrs. Davies hunched over, humiliated, her white hair disheveled. He saw Miller's badge, the name etched in his mind. When the video ended, a heavy silence fell again. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. "Sergeant Miller," Ricardo pronounced the name with a glacial tone Helena rarely heard. "This is an outrage, Detective. Your mother—" Helena raised her hand, interrupting him. "My mother is just the tip of the iceberg, Ricardo. This man didn't act alone. He feels untouchable because somehow he is, and he's not the only one." She approached the desk, her eyes fixed on Ricardo's. "We need a two-pronged strategy. First, Miller will be punished, exemplarily. Second, and more importantly, we will use this case to expose and eradicate the rot that allows men like him to thrive in our force." Ricardo nodded, his loyalty unwavering. "What do you need?" "Dig up everything on Sergeant Miller, Ricardo," Helena began, her voice gaining strength. "Not just his official record. I want to know who he associates with, where he spends his money, any suppressed complaints, any whispers in the corridors. I want names, dates, locations. We need irrefutable proof that links Miller to a larger scheme, a network of protection." She opened the internal system on the main monitor, showing Miller's file. "There's a pattern here, Ricardo. Small ignored infractions, promotions that are too fast. Someone is protecting him, or he's protecting someone." Detective Hayes was already typing on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Understood. I'll start with financial records and duty rosters from the last few months. And I'll have some informal conversations in intelligence and internal affairs without raising suspicion. Discreetly," Helena emphasized. "Any misstep now could alert them. They're like cockroaches. When one senses danger, they all scatter to hide." She picked up her phone again. "I'll contact Maria, the vendor. She's the key witness and the source of the recording. We need to protect her and secure her formal testimony, and of course talk to my mother." A pang of pain crossed her face as she mentioned Mrs. Davies. Meanwhile, in a noisy bar on the other side of town, the clinking of glasses and the buzz of conversations drowned out the sound of the local news on TV. Sergeant Miller, a beer glass in hand, laughed loudly, telling a colleague about the stubborn old woman from the market. "Had to teach her a lesson, right? To show her who's boss," he bellowed, a gulp of beer going down his throat, the bitter taste mixing with his satisfaction. The colleague, a younger, quieter officer, merely shook his head, a weak smile on his face, not daring to contradict the sergeant's arrogance. A message vibrating in Miller's pocket, a warning from a superior about a minor deviation in a patrol route, was promptly ignored. "I'll look at it later," he mumbled, focused on his own grandiosity. In her simple home, Mrs. Davies sat at the kitchen table, her wrinkled hands holding a cup of warm tea. The comforting aroma of herbs couldn't entirely soothe the unease in her chest. Maria's call, and the fact that Helena knew, brought a mix of relief and worry. She knew her daughter. She knew Helena wouldn't rest until justice was served, but she also feared the consequences of messing with big shots. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. She looked at the phone, thinking of calling her daughter, but decided it was best to let Helena do what she needed to. Back at Central Precinct, the lights in Helena's office would remain on for many hours. The detective and Ricardo delved into the data, each click of the keyboard, each whispered instruction, a firm step towards the abyss of corruption. Helena felt her mother's pain as an engine, an unshakable force that propelled her. She wasn't seeking revenge, but justice. A justice that would extend far beyond the limits of a single corrupt officer. The city slept, but at Central Precinct, a new battle was just beginning. The steady rhythm of Ricardo's keyboard clicks filled the tense silence of the office. The bluish light of the monitor reflected in his glasses as Helena watched her partner, the image of her mother's humiliation still burning in her retina. The city slept outside, oblivious to the storm brewing in the police offices. Ricardo delved into the systems, his fingers moving with the agility of a predator. "I found a pattern," he murmured, without taking his eyes off the screen. Small transfers of value to third-party accounts, always on dates close to routine operations at the market. Nothing blatant, but consistent, and some promotions that seem accelerated considering his conduct history. A dry click of the mouse echoed in the room. The conduct notes are always filed by a specific superior, Captain Roberts. Helena felt a shiver. Captain Roberts, a known name, respected, but with a reputation for protecting his men. "Roberts," she repeated, the name tasting bitter. "That fits. He's known for his loyalty, or for his network of favors. The rot we seek to eradicate has longer tentacles than we imagined." She picked up the phone. "While you investigate Roberts and the network, I need to secure the witnesses." She dialed Maria's number. One ring, two. "Hello?" Maria's voice was low, hesitant. "Maria, this is Detective Helena. Your recording was crucial. We need to talk in person, urgently and discreetly. Are you safe?" Helena heard the sound of heavy breathing on the other end of the line. "Yes, Detective, I'm scared. Miller is a dangerous man." "I know," Helena replied, her voice firm. "But you're not alone. I'll send a discreet patrol car to pick you up in an hour. No one will know you're coming here. And don't tell anyone about our conversation." Next, Helena dialed her mother. The phone rang for a while until Mrs. Davies answered, her voice a little hoarse. "Daughter, has something happened?" "Mom, it's me. I'm fine. And you?" The concern in Helena's voice was evident. I'm fine. Maria called me. I knew you'd do something." A sigh. "But be careful, my dear. These people are powerful." "I know, Mom, but I won't stop. I love you. I'll keep you informed, but I need you to trust me and not talk to anyone about this for now. It's important for everyone's safety." Mrs. Davies nodded, even though Helena couldn't see. "I trust you, my girl. Always." In the noisy bar, Miller's laughter reverberated. He raised his glass, the clinking of ice sounding like a victory melody. "Another round. For me, the king of the market." His colleague, a young officer with a restless look, tried to get his attention. "Sergeant, Captain Roberts called. It seems he wants to see those patrol reports from last week, the ones you adjusted." Miller waved his hand, dismissing the concern. "Roberts, he's always got these petty demands. Tell him I'm in the field. I'll look at it later. He knows how things work." A noisy gulp of beer sealed his ignorance. In her simple home, Mrs. Davies finished her tea. The aroma of herbs now seemed a little more comforting. She trusted Helena, but the image of the sergeant's cruel face still haunted her. The idea that her daughter was facing big shots filled her with a cold fear, but also immense pride. Her Helena had always been a fighter. Back at the office, Ricardo presented new data. Detective, one of Miller's contacts is a private security firm owner with recent contracts with the City Hall for market surveillance. Helena's eyes narrowed. The web was beginning to unravel, more complex and interconnected than she imagined. The hum of the air conditioning seemed like a conspiratorial whisper. The night wore on, and the search for justice transformed into a silent hunt, each revelation an untangled knot in the intricate web of corruption. The battle was truly beginning, and Helena knew it would be long and arduous. The discreet vehicle, an unmarked black sedan, stopped a few yards from Maria's house, its engine purring softly before falling silent. Maria, with a scarf covering her hair and her face pale, peeked through a crack in the curtain. Her heart pounded in her chest, an incessant drumming of fear and hope. She grabbed her small bag, her hands trembling, and stepped out into the cold night. The officer at the wheel nodded. "Miss Maria, Detective Helena is waiting for you." The door closed with a muffled click, and the car drove away without drawing attention. At Central Precinct, Helena waited in the reception area, tension in her upright posture. When Maria entered, the market vendor's frightened eyes met Helena's. The detective offered a reassuring smile. "Thank you for coming, Maria. You're safe here." She guided Maria to a private interrogation room, away from curious glances. The air was heavy, but Helena spoke with calculated calm. "We need every detail, Maria. Everything you saw, heard, anything that can help us understand the extent of this problem." Maria took a deep breath, the smell of coffee and old paper from the precinct filling her nostrils. "It was horrible, Detective. He was always like that. But that day was too much. He yelled, knocked Mrs. Davies' things over, and it wasn't the first time. The other vendors. Many pay. A protection fee, they say. If you don't pay, he makes your life hell." Maria's voice was a hoarse whisper, laden with years of silent oppression. "I've seen him talking with other officers, and with men in different uniforms, from that security company that now monitors the market, always in a corner, whispering." In the office, Ricardo typed furiously. Maria's information perfectly matched what he was finding. "Detective, Captain Roberts has a history of transferring assets to a shell company that belongs to the same private security firm owner. It's a well-constructed web." The sound of Ricardo's keyboard was the only noise, fast and relentless, and I found records of anonymous donations to local political campaigns, always linked to City Hall contract approvals for security services. Helena pressed her lips together, anger simmering but controlled. "So, it's not just Miller. It's a scheme involving Captain Roberts, a businessman, and possibly local politicians. A true Hydra." She turned to the mind map she was beginning to build on a whiteboard, connecting names and events with red lines. "We need more concrete evidence to directly link Roberts to the embezzlement and Miller's protection, and we need to trace those donations to identify the beneficiaries." The night wore on, and the city slept under Helena and Ricardo's tireless watch. With each new revelation, the network of corruption became more visible, more palpable. The detective knew the battle would be long and dangerous, but the image of her humiliated mother and Maria's words about the protection fee fueled her determination. She wouldn't just bring down Miller. She would dismantle the entire structure that allowed men like him to thrive. Justice was beginning to move, and nothing would stop her. Helena drew a red line on the mind map, connecting Captain Roberts to the private security firm owner and from there to a question mark representing the politicians. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder in the quiet of the early morning, a constant reminder of the complexity unfolding before her. With each new revelation, the network of corruption became more visible, more palpable. The detective knew the battle would be long and dangerous, but the image of her humiliated mother and Maria's words about the protection fee fueled her determination. She wouldn't just bring down Miller. She would dismantle the entire structure that allowed men like him to thrive. Justice was beginning to move, and nothing would stop her. "Ricardo, we need to go deeper into these donations," Helena ordered, her voice low but charged with authority. "Trace every cent. I want to know who received it, when and why, and cross-reference that with the dates of the City Hall contracts. If there's a pattern, it will emerge." Ricardo nodded, his fingers already flying over the keyboard. The steady rhythm of the clicks filled the silence, a mechanical melody of investigation. The monitor screen cast a bluish glow on his concentrated face. "I'm on it, Detective. Initial analyses show that the donations are always made by shell companies, headquartered at phantom addresses or law firms representing multiple clients. It's a digging job, but the nuggets are starting to appear." As Ricardo delved into the data, Helena stepped away from the board, her mind racing. Corruption wasn't a single-headed monster, but a hydra with tentacles extending throughout the city. She needed a strategy that would cut off all heads at once, or at least the most important ones. Far from there, at the corner bar, Miller emptied another glass of beer, his laughter loud and carefree. The smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke permeated the air. He was oblivious to the storm brewing in the police offices, but a subtle change in his superior, Captain Roberts' behavior, was starting to bother him. That same night, Roberts was in his office, the lights low, the silence broken only by the creak of his chair. The phone rang, a jarring sound that made him jump. "Roberts," he answered, his voice tense. On the other end of the line, a grave, irritated voice, which he recognized as that of the private security firm owner, echoed. "Captain, there are rumors. An internal investigation. They're sniffing around the City Hall contracts. You need to make sure nothing is loose. Nothing!" A dry click ended the call. Roberts felt a chill down his spine. He didn't know where the threat was coming from, but the pressure was palpable. He needed to tighten the screws. Back at Central Precinct, Ricardo exclaimed, a tone of victory in his voice. "Detective, I found it, a clear pattern." The private security firm of the businessman Miller contacted made a series of donations to the campaign of a specific councilman, Councilman Thompson. And guess what? All donations occurred weeks before the approval of market surveillance contracts, always with amounts that bordered the legal limit to avoid immediate suspicion. Helena approached the screen, her eyes fixed on the names and numbers. Councilman Thompson, a known name. He's always been a staunch defender of these private security contracts, claiming improved public safety. Now we know why. A cold smile appeared on her lips. "This is more than a link, Ricardo. It's a chain. We have the corrupt officer, the captain who protects him, the businessman who profits, and the politician who facilitates. The Hydra is revealing itself." Ricardo's keyboard went back to work, now with a renewed sense of urgency. And there's more. The shell companies that made the donations are all managed by a single law firm, which also defends the interests of the security firm owner. It's all interconnected, Detective. Helena felt a mix of satisfaction and burden. With each knot untangled, the web proved larger, more intricate. Her mother's pain now mingled with the rare opportunity to clean up a significant part of the city. "Excellent work, Ricardo. Prepare a detailed report. We need to present this to the district attorney. With Councilman Thompson involved, things escalate, and we need to ensure the safety of Maria, and especially my mother. The net is closing in, and those involved might react." The night wore on, and the silence of the precinct was broken only by the clicks of the keyboard and the hum of the air conditioning. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the storm brewing. Helena knew that the real battle was yet to come, but now she had the weapons and the strategy to fight. Justice was one step closer to manifesting. The early morning gave way to a pale dawn as Helena finalized the arrangements for her mother's and Maria's safety. An unmarked patrol car with 2 trusted agents now discreetly monitored Mrs. Davies' residence, while Maria had been relocated to a secure apartment within the force itself, away from any curious eyes. The click of the phone as it hung up echoed in the silent room, and Helena felt a slight relief, mixed with the certainty that the calm was only superficial. In the office, Ricardo typed the last lines of the report, the constant sound of the keyboard a soundtrack to the complex web they were unraveling. The monitor screen projected graphs and tables, connecting names, dates, and values with terrifying clarity. "Detective, the report is ready," he announced, his voice a little hoarse from fatigue. "The link between Captain Roberts, the private security firm owner, and Councilman Thompson is undeniable. The financial movements of the shell companies, the donations to the campaign, and the contract approval dates form a pattern that cannot be ignored." Helena approached, reviewing the data. Each page was a blow against the power structure that considered itself untouchable. "Excellent, Ricardo. Print everything. We need physical copies for the district attorney, and review once more the points that directly link Captain Roberts to Miller's protection. It's crucial that there are no loopholes." Meanwhile, the city began to awaken under a grey sky. At the corner bar, Miller, his face swollen and eyes bloodshot, emptied the last gulp of a warm beer. The easy laughter of the previous night had vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence. His phone vibrated, and the name Roberts flashed on the screen. "Miller, I need you to come to my office, now. And I don't want anyone to know you were here." The captain's voice sounded sharp, without his usual comradely tone. A chill ran down Miller's spine. Something was wrong. The smell of alcohol in his mouth suddenly tasted bitter. Captain Roberts, in his dimly lit office, rubbed his temples. The call from the businessman had put him on high alert. With each passing hour, the feeling that the ground was crumbling beneath his feet increased. He called the businessman again, his voice low and tense. "The rumors! They're about Detective Helena. She's sniffing around the market contracts. I called Miller. I need to know what he might have said." On the other end, the businessman's grave voice sounded like distant thunder. "Roberts, you need to control this situation. If anything comes out, I won't be the only one to fall, and you know what happens to those who don't keep their end of the bargain." A dry click ended the call, leaving Roberts immersed in an oppressive silence. He knew he was on a tightrope, with predators on both sides. Shortly after, Miller knocked on Roberts' office door, the sound muffled in the empty corridor. Upon entering, the captain stared at him with cold eyes. "Miller, you've been acting carelessly. There's an internal investigation. They're looking into the market security contracts. Are you sure you haven't done anything that could compromise us?" Miller swallowed hard, fear growing in his chest. "No, Captain. I always did what you told me. I just collected the fees. No one will say anything." Roberts watched him for a long moment. "It better be that way, because if they talk, you'll be the first to pay the price. And don't expect me to protect you." The weight of Robert's words made Miller's stomach churn. The impunity he had always enjoyed suddenly seemed a distant mirage. At Central Precinct, the smell of fresh coffee began to spread. Helena reviewed the final report completed by Ricardo, the pile of papers a testament to the corruption that permeated the city. "Ricardo, I want you to prepare to accompany the presentation to the district attorney. We need to be impeccable." The hum of the air conditioning now seemed a silent hymn to the justice that was about to be served. The image of her mother's humiliated face, Maria's choked voice and the audacity of that criminal network fueled an unshakable determination in Helena. The battle was far from over, but the first and most important pieces of the puzzle were now in her hands. Justice was beginning to manifest, and Helena was ready to be its sword. The morning sun had barely risen when Helena and Ricardo prepared for the crucial meeting. The final report, a meticulously organized stack of papers, rested on Helena's desk, each page a testament to the web of corruption they had unraveled. The smell of new paper and fresh ink hung in the air. "All set, Ricardo?" Helena asked, her voice firm. "Absolutely, Detective. Every transaction, every connection, every name is documented and cross-referenced. There's no denying the facts," he replied, with a glint of exhaustion and triumph in his eyes. On the way to the district attorney's office, Helena's car glided through the city's still sleeping streets. The silence inside the vehicle was broken only by the faint hum of the engine, a contrast to the storm they were about to unleash. The image of her mother, the pain in her eyes, was a constant reminder of what was at stake. In the meeting room of District Attorney Edward Costa, the atmosphere was formal and tense. Dr. Costa, a man of serious demeanor and impeccable reputation, listened to Helena with unwavering attention. Ricardo projected graphs and spreadsheets onto a screen, the numbers and names connecting in an inescapable network. Helena began her presentation, her voice calm and factual, but charged with contained indignation. "Dr. Costa, what we have here is not an isolated case of a corrupt officer. It's a structure of extortion and money laundering that extends through several levels of public administration and the private sector. It involves Captain Roberts, the private security firm owner, and Councilman Thompson." She detailed the campaign: donations, the inflated contracts, the shell companies. The sound of Ricardo's mouse clicks accompanied each slide transition, punctuating the narrative with irrefutable evidence. Dr. Costa occasionally drummed his fingers on the table, a dry, thoughtful sound. At the end of the presentation, a heavy silence fell over the room. Dr. Costa leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the screen where Councilman Thompson's name was the last to flash. "Detective Helena," he said, his voice low, "the gravity of these accusations is alarming. The extent of this network is something I did not expect to see in our city." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The facts are undeniable. We need to act quickly and discreetly. Arrest warrants for Sergeant Miller, Captain Roberts, and the security firm owner, and an in-depth investigation into Councilman Thompson with a request for bank and tax record disclosure. I want a specialized team to follow every step." A slight hum of approval escaped Ricardo. Helena merely nodded, an expression of determination on her face. The first domino was about to fall. Far from there, in his apartment, Miller woke to the jarring sound of his phone. It was Roberts. "Miller, where are you? I need you at my office. Now, and don't use the force vehicle." Roberts' voice was tense, almost a whisper. Miller felt a chill. The previous night, with Roberts' veiled threat, now seemed a dark omen. He knew something was very wrong. The smell of burnt coffee from his neighbor's kitchen suddenly seemed nauseating. At the same instant, Captain Roberts' phone rang again. It was the businessman. "Roberts, the rumors are more than rumors. Detective Helena went to the district attorney. All hell is about to break loose. You need to get rid of anything that links us. Now!" The businessman's voice was a furious growl, cut short by an abrupt click. Roberts threw the phone onto the desk, the sound of its fall echoing in the empty office. He was cornered. The predators were closing in, and he was the weakest link. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Back at Central Precinct, Helena and Ricardo reviewed the last details with the team responsible for the arrests. The faint crackle of police radios in the operations room was the soundtrack to the imminent action. "Remember discretion and safety above all else," Helena instructed, her eyes scanning each face. These men are dangerous and may react. Do not underestimate their ability to try to cover their tracks or resist. Ricardo, beside her, clicked on a final file, confirming addresses and routes. The teams are ready, Detective. The warrants are being printed right now. Helena felt a lump in her throat. Justice, so abstract at times, was about to materialize into concrete actions. The image of her mother, the market, the face of Officer Miller, everything connected. The city was about to feel the tremor of a long-awaited cleansing. The distant sound of sirens, still muffled by distance, announced the beginning of the hunt. The wail of sirens, once a distant lament, transformed into a deafening chorus, tearing through the morning quiet and echoing through the city streets. Its sharp, insistent cry vibrated in windows, permeating apartments and offices. In his cramped apartment, Miller threw his phone onto the bed, the sound of the screen hitting the mattress. Sweat trickled down his forehead, and the smell of burnt coffee from his neighbor's kitchen suddenly seemed like the odor of his own ruin. The sirens were rapidly approaching, the sound vibrating in his bones. "No, it can't be," he murmured, his voice hoarse with panic. He ran to the window, peeking through a crack in the curtain. Blue and red lights pulsed in the street below, reflecting off building facades. Police cruisers, many of them, blocked the street. Miller's heart pounded erratically, a frantic drum in his chest. He needed to flee. But where? The apartment, once a refuge, was now a trap. He fumbled hastily under the mattress, pulling out a thick envelope of cash. The sound of heavy footsteps ascending the stairs echoed in the hallway, accompanied by firm, authoritative voices. "Police! Sergeant Miller, open the door!" The dry thud of a battering ram against the wooden door made Miller flinch. He knew it was the end. There was no escape. He threw himself to the floor, hands on his head, as the door gave way with a violent crack, opening to the cold morning light and the determined faces of Helena's team. Meanwhile, in Captain Roberts' office, chaos was a silent symphony of destruction. The phone lay abandoned on the desk, the businessman's furious growl still echoing in his mind. Roberts ripped papers from folders, tossing them into a metal wastebasket. The sound of tearing and crumpling was the only noise in the room. He turned on the paper shredder, and the mechanical hum devoured important documents, turning financial reports and contracts into unrecognizable confetti. Sweat streamed down his face, mixing with tears of frustration and fear. He was cornered. The sirens, now closer, were a sharp lament approaching his building. He heard the scrape of tires on the street and the sound of car doors slamming. His eyes widened. It was too late. He ran to the window but quickly recoiled. Police cruisers were parked in front of the main entrance and on the side of the building. There was no escape. The sound of voices in the corridor, the creak of the elevator, and then hurried footsteps. A loud bang on the door. "Captain Roberts, open the door. It's the police." Roberts felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He was lost. The sound of the door being forced open, the crack of splitting wood, seemed like the sound of his own life unraveling. In Central Precinct's operations room, Helena watched the monitors. Digital maps showed the team's positions, green dots moving towards their targets. The radio in her hand crackled, and an agent's voice came through clearly. "Miller apprehended, Detective. No resistance." A sigh of relief escaped Ricardo, who stood beside her. "Excellent. Next target, Captain Roberts." A few minutes later, another crackle on the radio. "Captain Roberts, detained, tried to destroy evidence, but we managed to recover some folders." Helena's face remained impassive, but a glint of satisfaction danced in her eyes. The first phase was complete. The sound of agents' keyboards clicking as they logged the incidents filled the room. "Ricardo, now the Councilman Thompson team. I want the search and seizure to be thorough. Every document, every electronic device, and the businessman's team to be equally rigorous. We cannot leave any loose ends," Helena instructed, her voice firm and full of authority. The city, which minutes before seemed asleep, now pulsed with the energy of a large-scale police operation. Sirens continued to wail, announcing not just arrests, but the beginning of a new era. Justice, driven by a mother's pain and a daughter's courage, was beginning to rewrite the fate of many. The smell of fresh coffee in the precinct now seemed an aroma of victory, mixed with the metallic scent of adrenaline in the air. The sun, finally breaking through the clouds, cast golden rays over the city, illuminating a new dawn. The sun, now high in the sky, bathed the city in vibrant light, but the energy at Central Precinct was even more intense. The arrests of Miller and Roberts had been just the prelude. Helena, with unwavering posture, watched the digital maps, her eyes fixed on the green dots representing the search and seizure teams. The radio in her hand crackled again, and the voice of the agent responsible for the operation at Councilman Thompson's address sounded with contained urgency. "Detective, we're on site. The breaching team is ready. Proceed with caution and record everything," Helena instructed, her voice firm, echoing in the expectant silence of the operations room. A dull thud, followed by the crack of the door's wood giving way, reverberated on the radio. Inside Councilman Thompson's mansion, luxury and ostentation were evident. The sound of agents' heavy footsteps filled the opulent corridors, breaking the morning's quiet. Thompson, a corpulent man, appeared at the top of the staircase, his face pale and eyes wide with disbelief and fury. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just invade my property like this. I am Councilman Thompson." His voice, once powerful in council meetings, now trembled. "Councilman Thompson, we have a search and seizure warrant," one of the agents declared, holding up the document. The clicking sound of cameras began to fill the air, recording every detail of the scene. The digital forensic investigation team was already moving towards the offices, their equipment softly humming as they prepared to clone hard drives and analyze electronic devices. Drawers were opened, books removed from shelves, and the rustle of papers mingled with the agent's murmurs. In a secret compartment behind a bookshelf, a hollow volume revealed a folder with bank documents and handwritten notes, each page a crucial link in the web of corruption. The sound of paper being handled with latex gloves was distinct. In parallel, the team assigned to the private security firm owner acted with the same precision. In the mirrored office complex housing his companies, the atmosphere was one of panic. The businessman, a man of cold and calculating demeanor, frantically tried to delete files from his computer, the rapid click of the mouse and furious typing echoing in his office. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor and a door slamming against the wall announced the arrival of the police. "Stop! Police! Hands on your head!" The agent's voice was thunderous. The businessman froze, hands raised, a look of despair on his face. On the monitor, a file deletion window was still blinking. Cyber forensics experts acted quickly, isolating the computer and beginning data recovery. The hum of the servers in the company's data center, once a sign of power, now seemed a lament. Boxes upon boxes of documents were sealed and taken away. Contracts, suspicious payment spreadsheets, encrypted emails. Each item was a piece of the puzzle. The smell of printer ink and old paper hung in the air, mixing with the metallic aroma of tension. Back at Central Precinct, Ricardo monitored the incoming reports, his fingers typing rapidly on the keyboard. "Detective, we found another safe in Councilman Thompson's house, and the businessman's team is reporting the recovery of important data from a server he tried to shut down." A tense smile appeared on Helena's face. "Excellent. I want everything catalogued and digitized. Every cent, every contact, every transaction. We cannot leave any room for doubt." The sound of radios continued. A chorus of voices reporting new findings, minor resistances, and the transport of detainees to the precinct. The image of her mother, humiliated at the market, flashed through Helena's mind. The pain was still there, But now it was tempered by a sense of justice beginning to blossom. The smell of fresh coffee in the precinct, which once seemed an aroma of victory, now mingled with the smell of paper and dust from the newly seized files, an aroma of truth coming to light. The city, which minutes before seemed asleep, now pulsed with the energy of a large-scale police operation. Sirens continued to wail, announcing not just arrests, but the beginning of a new era. Justice, driven by a mother's pain and a daughter's courage, was beginning to rewrite the fate of many. The sun, breaking through the clouds, cast golden rays over the city, illuminating a new dawn, but also revealing the deepest shadows. The web of corruption, once hidden, now unfolded under the relentless light of the law, and the tremor of a long-awaited cleansing spread to every corner of the city. And at Central Precinct, that tremor manifested as a fever of activity. The sun, now a golden stain in the sky, bathed the city. But within the precinct walls, the light was from fluorescent lamps, revealing piles of evidence that grew by the minute. The smell of strong coffee mingled with the metallic aroma of ozone from electronic equipment, and the odor of old paper and dust from the newly arrived boxes. In the operations room, the constant hum of computers was a chorus of productivity. Ricardo, his eyes red with fatigue, but his spirit invigorated, typed non-stop, logging every seized item. Beside him, agents organized boxes and folders, the rustle of papers and the click of cameras documenting every detail. Helena observed everything with silent intensity. On a large screen, images of Councilman Thompson's mansion and the private security firm owner's office were displayed, showing the extent of the seizure. The safe found in Thompson's house, now open, revealed not only money, but also jewelry and documents linking the corruption network to even more influential political figures. The sound of a forensic expert's camera shutter, recording the stacks of bills, was a dry, revealing click. In the interrogation sector, Captain Roberts sat in a metal chair, his face swollen and eyes fixed on the table. The silence in the room was broken only by the low tick-tock of a wall clock and the sound of Roberts' heavy breathing. He had tried to maintain a posture of superiority, but the overwhelming evidence and the interrogator's firmness had broken his facade. A glass of water, untouched, rested before him, the faint sound of melting ice seeming an echo of his own collapse. In another room, Miller, the officer who had initiated the entire chain of events, was hunched over. His hoarse voice mumbled excuses and half-truths, but each word was a loose thread that investigators quickly wove into the tapestry of his guilt. The creak of the metal chair as he shifted seemed to scratch the silence of the room. The sound of a pen scratching a notepad was the agents' only response, relentless in their pursuit of truth. Detective, the digital forensics team managed to recover 90% of the files the businessman tried to delete, Ricardo announced, his voice thick with satisfaction. They are falsified contracts, records of payments to straw men, and a series of emails detailing the operations. We also have a list of other involved parties, some big names. Helena nodded, a glint of determination in her eyes. Excellent work, Ricardo. I want that list verified and cross-referenced with the physical documents. Prepare arrest and search warrants for the next targets. We cannot give them time to react. The sound of radios continued to crackle, a constant flow of information confirming the vastness of the corruption network. Street teams reported the transport of more witnesses and the seizure of new materials. The city, which minutes before seemed asleep, now pulsed with the energy of a large-scale police operation. Sirens, though less frequent, could still be heard. A reminder that justice was in motion. News of the arrests began to spread like wildfire. Phones at the precinct rang incessantly, the jarring sound of calls from journalists and lawyers filling the air. Televisions in the precinct offices showed breaking news headlines, with images of police vehicles and the buildings where the arrests occurred. The sound of reporters' voices, mixed with the precinct's buzz, created an atmosphere of urgency and revelation. Helena walked to her office window, observing the city. The sun, now higher, illuminated the buildings, but also revealed the persistent shadows. Her mother's pain was still a vivid memory, a silent engine that propelled her every action. She knew the fight was far from over. The web of corruption was deep and complex, and with each thread pulled, others revealed themselves. But the first major knot had been untangled. The sound of a new era, of a city in search of its dignity, began to echo, and Helena was ready to lead the chorus. The smell of fresh coffee, mixed with the aroma of paper and dust from the newly seized files, was now the aroma of truth coming to light, and the sound of justice, a powerful melody, began to silence the noise of impunity. The sound of justice, which began to silence the noise of impunity, now reverberated not only in the corridors of Central Precinct, but throughout the city. The smell of strong coffee, mixed with the aroma of paper and dust from the newly seized files, was the scent of truth coming to light, and this odor hung heavy in the air, charged with expectation. In the interrogation room, Captain Roberts, visibly distraught, finally broke the silence that had stretched for hours. His voice, once full of authority, now sounded hoarse and broken, an almost inaudible murmur. I can't take it anymore, he said, his head bowed. The sound of the agent's pen scratching paper was the only sound to fill the void before he began to spill names, dates, and locations, unraveling a web of complicity that went far beyond what the initial investigation had mapped. Each word was a dry crack, a fissure in the foundation of corruption. In parallel, Miller, the officer who had initiated Mrs. Davies's nightmare, was in another room, the sound of his sobs muffled by the metal door. He clung to half-truths, but the pressure of the evidence and the prospect of a severe sentence were crushing him. The creak of the metal chair as he writhed seemed to echo his agony. One of the agents, with a calm and firm voice, continued to present the facts, each one a stone in the wall of his denial. In the operations room, the pace was frantic. Ricardo, with an untouched cup of coffee beside his keyboard, reviewed the recovered data. Detective, Captain Roberts is confirming the information we recovered from the businessman's server. The names match. We have a list of at least 5 more people, including a Judge Harrison and a State Commissioner Evans. The network is much more intricate than we thought. Ricardo's voice was a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Helena felt a shiver. The scale of the corruption was frightening, but the determination in her eyes only grew. Ricardo, I want you to prepare arrest and search warrants for these new targets immediately. We cannot lose momentum. I want teams ready to act before dawn. The press will go wild, but security is paramount. The buzz in the precinct grew by the minute. Phones rang incessantly, the jarring sound of calls from journalists and lawyers filling the air. Televisions in the precinct offices showed breaking news headlines, with images of police vehicles and the buildings where the arrests occurred. Corruption scandal hits political elite. Operation Relentless Justice unmasks criminal network, the headlines screamed. The sound of reporters' voices, mixed with the precinct's buzz, created an atmosphere of urgency and unprecedented revelation. Helena walked to her office window, observing the city that now buzzed with activity. The sun had already set, and the city lights began to twinkle, painting a scene of contrasts. Her mother's pain was still a vivid memory, a silent engine that propelled her every action. But now she also felt the responsibility of a city that placed its hope in her. The web of corruption was deep and complex, and with each thread pulled, others revealed themselves, denser and darker. She knew the fight was far from over. Resistance would be fierce, political maneuvers, relentless, but the first major knot had been untangled, and the force of truth, once unleashed, was unstoppable. The sound of a new era, of a city in search of its dignity, began to echo, and Helena was ready to lead the chorus, her voice firm and unshakable. The smell of fresh coffee, mixed with the aroma of paper and dust from the newly seized files, was now the aroma of truth coming to light, and the sound of justice, a powerful melody, began to silence the noise of impunity, promising a dawn of cleansing and renewal. The promise of justice was not long in coming. The powerful melody of truth, now unveiled by testimonies and evidence, echoed through the corridors of Central Precinct, silencing the noise of impunity that had suffocated the city for so long. In the operations room, the hum of computers and the murmur of voices intensified, transforming into a chorus of preparation for the next phase. Ricardo, adrenaline coursing through his veins, finalized the warrants. The rapid sound of his keys was a constant beat that propelled the urgency of the mission. "All set, Detective. The teams are in position. Judge Harrison and State Commissioner Evans will be approached simultaneously." "Surprise is our greatest ally," he reported, his voice tense but firm. Helena nodded, the image of her humiliated mother still a vivid memory, but now overlaid by relentless determination. "Execute with precision, Ricardo. I want every step documented. No failures can be tolerated." Shortly before the sun painted the horizon with shades of purple and orange, sirens, previously sporadic, erupted in the early morning. A shrill chorus that tore through the silence of the sleeping city. Unmarked vehicles, followed by police cruisers, converged on the most affluent neighborhoods. The sound of tires gliding on wet asphalt and the metallic click of doors opening echoed in the deserted streets. In Judge Harrison's imposing residence, the crash of the door being forced open reverberated through the night's silence. Cries of surprise and indignation followed, muffled by the firm voices of the agents announcing the arrest. The clink of handcuffs securing the wrists of the man, once untouchable, was a dry and definitive sound. Elsewhere in the city, State Commissioner Evans, caught by surprise in his bed, uttered threats and expletives, but the sound of his hoarse voice was powerless against the authority of the law. The click of cameras recorded the scene, each flash a point of light in the darkness of corruption. Back at the precinct, the buzz was deafening. Phones rang incessantly, the jarring sound of calls from journalists, lawyers, and political figures filling the air. Televisions in the offices showed the first images of the arrests, with breathless reporters narrating the details. Corruption scandal hits, judiciary and executive power. Operation Relentless Justice unmasks criminal network, screamed the breaking news headlines. The sound of reporters' voices, mixed with the precinct's clamor, created an atmosphere of urgency and unprecedented revelation. Helena watched the screen. Seeing the shocked and indignant faces of the newly arrested, she knew the resistance would be fierce. Political maneuvers and attempts to discredit the operation would begin soon. The smell of fresh coffee, mixed with the aroma of paper and dust from the newly seized files, was now the scent of truth coming to light, but also the smell of the battle ahead. Minutes later, a renowned lawyer, his voice laden with fury, demanded to speak with the detective, the sound of his protests muffled by her office door. Helena, however, was unfazed. She walked to the window, watching the sun rise, painting the sky with vibrant colors. The city, which minutes before seemed asleep, now buzzed with activity. The lights of the buildings came on, revealing the vastness of the metropolis, but also the persistent shadows. Her mother's pain was still a vivid memory, a silent engine that propelled her every action, but now she also felt the weight of responsibility for a city that placed its hope in her. The web of corruption was deeper and more complex than anyone had imagined, and with each thread pulled, others revealed themselves, denser and darker, She knew the fight was far from over. The powerful would not surrender easily, but the first major knot had been untangled, and the force of truth, once unleashed, was unstoppable. The sound of a new era, of a city in search of its dignity, now echoed with undeniable power, and Helena was ready to lead the chorus, her voice firm and unshakable. Helena's voice resonated through the precinct corridors, silencing the protests of the furious lawyer who now retreated, the sound of his shoes tapping on the marble floor, an echo of his momentary defeat. The new era, which had only echoed before, now manifested in every decision, in every act of courage by the detective. The city, awakening under the first rays of sun, buzzed with news of the arrests and public outcry. Once a murmur of discontent transformed into a powerful chorus of support for justice. The following hours were a whirlwind. Phones rang non-stop, and the incessant click of press cameras filled the precinct courtyard, where Ricardo, with an exhausted but victorious expression, made a brief statement. Operation Relentless Justice continues. No sphere of power is above the law, he declared, and the sound of flashes was like a shower of light on the truth emerging. Helena, however, sought a moment of quiet before facing the press. She took her car keys and drove through the still damp streets of the early morning, the engine purring softly towards her mother's house. The sun was already high when she arrived, and the smell of fresh coffee, mixed with the aroma of freshly baked bread, filled the air. Mrs. Rosa Davies was in the kitchen, watering her violets, the sound of water gently falling on the green leaves, a melody of peace. Seeing her daughter, a radiant smile spread across the elderly woman's face. "My dear, you're exhausted," she said, her voice soft but full of pride. Helena hugged her mother tightly, feeling the familiar warmth and the fragility of her body. The pain of humiliation, which had propelled Helena for so long, now dissipated, replaced by a deep sense of duty fulfilled and unconditional love. "It's almost over, Mom. The truth is coming out." Mrs. Davies caressed her daughter's face. "I always knew you'd make a difference, Helena. You are the voice of those who cannot speak." The sound of her mother's words was a balm to Helena's soul, a confirmation that every sacrifice had been worth it. Back at the precinct, the press conference awaited. Helena stepped up to the podium, and the buzz ceased abruptly. The sound of microphones being adjusted was the only noise before she began to speak. Her voice, calm and firm, filled the hall. She detailed the evidence, the testimonies, the intricate network of corruption that had been dismantled. She spoke about the importance of integrity, the responsibility of every citizen, and above all, the need to protect the most vulnerable. "This is not just a victory for the police," Helena declared, and the sound of her voice carried the weight of hope. "It is a victory for every citizen who refuses to accept injustice. It is the beginning of a new era where honesty is not an exception, but the rule." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Operation Relentless Justice continued to expand, revealing new layers of corruption, not only in the police force, but in various spheres of public power. Officer Miller and Captain Roberts were convicted, their sentences serving as a stark reminder that no one was above the law. Judge Harrison and State Commissioner Evans, after lengthy trials and desperate attempts at appeals, also faced justice, their careers and reputations in ruins. The city began to breathe different air. The sound of sirens, once associated with fear and impunity, now carried an echo of hope. The reform in the police force, led by Helena, transformed the institution's culture, prioritizing ethics and community service. Anonymous reporting programs were implemented, and the sound of the phone ringing at the Ombudsman's office became a sign that the population once again trusted the authorities. Helena, now a revered figure, continued her tireless work. The image of her mother at the market, humiliated and defenseless, remained a silent reminder, an invisible engine that propelled her. But the pain had transformed into strength, the injustice into fuel for a silent revolution. On a quiet morning, Helena walked through the market again, no longer as the victim's daughter, but as the guardian of justice. The buzz of the vendors, the sound of animated conversations, the aroma of fresh fruits and colorful vegetables, everything seemed more vibrant, more alive. She saw an elderly woman with a gentle smile, selling her flowers without the slightest sign of fear. The sound of children's laughter echoed near her, and Helena felt a profound peace. The fight for dignity was continuous, a melody that would never cease. But the first great chord had been struck, and its resonance promised a future where true strength resided in defending the most vulnerable, where justice was not just a word, but the very melody that cradled the city. The sound of impunity had been silenced, and in its place, the powerful and unshakable melody of justice echoed, a hymn of hope for all.